Welcome to Restaurant Influencers, presented by Entrepreneur. I am your host, Sean Walchef. This is a Cali BBQ Media production. In life, in the restaurant business, and in the new creator economy, we learn through lessons and stories. I want to give a special shout out to Toast, our primary technology partner at our barbecue restaurants, for believing in storytelling, for giving us the tools to help us sell more barbecue to more people here in San Diego, but also for giving us the opportunity to have cool conversations like the one we're going to have here today. Today, we have a very special guest. His name is Dara Mirjahangiry. He is the co-founder of Sei Less, and that is at Sei, SEILESS. If you are in New York, you know about this brand because it's kind of a big deal. So we're honored to have you on the show. Dara, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So we're going to start with our favorite random question, which is, where in the world is your favorite stadium, stage, or venue?
It's got to be MSG, the Mecca of New York City and basketball. Diehard Knicks fan, so I would say Madison Square Garden is definitely my favorite venue.
Okay, cool. We're going to talk to Entrepreneur. We're going to talk to Toast, talk to some other brands, and we're going to put on a hospitality storytelling conference, kind of like TEDx style, and rent out MSG. I'm going to put you on center court, and I'm going to ask, Dara, it's mic drop time. Let us know, who are you and what do you believe? What are you building?
My name is Dara Mirjahangiry, and I born in Iran, grew up in New Jersey, went to college in Syracuse. Worked in finance until 2008, financial crisis, made a pivot to hospitality. I've been building my network for the last 15 years. And about 2 years ago, opened up Sei Less restaurant, which was towards the tail of the end of the pandemic. It was kind of like a culmination of all my work together and, really hit the ground running. The who's who of sports, music, media, everyone, came out to try the restaurant, support it. And it's been an incredible 2-year run. I feel like we're just at the beginning of what we're going to do with the brand. And, obviously we've done some pop-ups. Most recently, we just did a pop-up in Indianapolis for NBA All-Star Weekend, which was a great success. So it's kind of evolving in the sense that, obviously we're going to open up new locations and expand the brand. But right now, obviously, New York City is our focus.
Can you bring us back to the inception of the brand, the name?
Yeah, so it actually started, I was having a conversation with Kevin Durant right when he re-signed with the Brooklyn Nets. And I've known Kev since he was on the Oklahoma City Thunder, early in his career. So he was like, we need a clubhouse in New York, after the game, somewhere where I can go and, feel like it's almost like a membership club for the culture. So shortly after that conversation, the pandemic hit. So, I went to LA, met up with Kev, went to his house, continued the conversation. And at the time, I really thought that New York City was never coming back from the pandemic. It was, like the apocalypse hit New York City. And obviously working in the restaurant business, it was a scary time, didn't really know what the future held. So I was kind of open to the idea of moving out to LA and opening up the concept in LA. Maybe a week into being in LA, the riots break out in LA. So now I'm there trying to open up a restaurant in LA, and literally there was no real estate agents showing spaces. It was just a really upside down time. So I came back to New York, and that's kind of when I put together the idea of, opening a membership club for the culture. I started looking at spaces, and at the time I was thinking of what's a great name for a membership club. And Say No More kept popping into my head. And I thought about it. I was like, that's just too wordy. People might not get it. It's not really Asian. So I was like, how do I make Say No more Asian and less wordy? So Say Less popped into my head. So I wrote down on a piece of paper, SAYLESS, and I looked at it and I was like, that's not going to work. So I thought about how can I say in a different rendition? And then Sensei popped into my head. But Sensei is SAI. So I wrote SAILESS. And I looked at it and I was like, that doesn't look right either. Changed the A to an E, and that's how Say Less was born.
Was this your first restaurant concept?
It was the first restaurant that I opened and owned on my own. Obviously I have partners, but previously I was helping other people open up their restaurants, but it wasn't my baby kind of.
When did the idea of having your own restaurant baby become born?
Probably 15 years ago.
Okay.
worked at, one of the hottest restaurants in New York at the time, really understood what they were doing, understood the business model, the network, the margins. And I always thought it would be great to, be part of something like that on a bigger scale. But obviously, I was early in my career. Um, so I kept just kind of working, grinding, networking, hoping that one day I would get the opportunity. Sadly enough, my previous bosses never wanted to, extend that opportunity to me. I kind of pushed, I asked, tried to prove myself, and I just learned that no one's gonna give you an opportunity if they don't have to. So I just kind of waited for the right timing, and the pandemic, as much as it was a difficult time in the hospitality world, it also created certain opportunities that didn't exist before.
What did you learn at Syracuse studying finance and marketing that you actually use today?
Um, I guess the principles of a balance sheet. Obviously, a lot of people that open restaurants, they worry about the glitz and the glamour, and the stuff that's forward facing, but the back end stuff is really how you run a profitable business. So a lot of the accounting courses I took, and the financial courses that I took, that I never thought I would be applying to the hospitality industry, are things that I use every day. And it's not necessarily like sitting in front of an Excel spreadsheet and crunching numbers, but just the principles behind them, and inventory practices, and different kinds of accounting practices that I apply to the day-to-day operation of the business.
I saw that you studied abroad in Madrid, Spain.
Yeah.
Did you learn anything in Madrid? Because I went to Alicante.
Yeah, I learned that you don't eat dinner before 11 p.m. and you take a nap in the middle of the day.
Bring me back to the beginning. You said for 15 years you've been building your network. What does it mean to build a network?
So, I mean, I've obviously been building my network ever since I probably started working at 14 years old. But in New York City, in the hospitality business, um, one of the reasons that I pivoted from finance to hospitality was the financial markets were upside down. It was difficult to get a financial job at the time. And I had experience in hospitality working as a waiter during college, thinking that it was just a temporary thing, obviously to make ends meet while I was in college. But in 2008, I decided to, get back into the hospitality world. And my vision of it was that I'm going to work in this restaurant. There's a lot of high profile people, a lot of, influential people there, a lot of high net worth people. And I'm going to, find myself a career or a job, and that was going to be a temporary thing. As that evolved within 9 months, there was a little shakeup in the management, hierarchy. And I had the opportunity to become a manager within 9 months of starting to work there. And that's really when, I put the suit on, and I started, building my own network. The people that I worked with at the time, they obviously knew a lot of the customers from being there well before me. And, I realized that they were paying attention to mostly the Upper East Side clients that were frequently in the restaurant, but they weren't really paying attention to the music artists and the athletes. Um, and not just because like they didn't care, they just sometimes they didn't know who they were, and sometimes it was just a cultural difference. A lot of the people I work with are Eastern European, and they just didn't understand the culture. So that started at the restaurant, but then it was before Uber existed, before Facebook existed, not before Facebook, before Instagram, and there wasn't that ability to really like post in real time. Facebook was kind of, you take pictures and then you post them on afterwards. So I started the social media for the restaurant, and really, got embedded in the culture of sports and music. And a big part of that was through, social media, and networking. So just as I built their social media, I built my following, built a brand for myself. Um, and that's really what networking is. It's just being able to connect the dots, and also, being genuine with people, and add value to people's lives.
I love that. Yeah. One of my favorite Danny Myers quotes is ABCD, always be collecting the dots so that you can always be connecting the dots. And social media is such an incredible tool. Can you bring me back to Instagram specifically of, what were you doing in the early days to build community, essentially what you're doing?
Yeah, so at the time I was about 30 years old, um, and I didn't really know what Instagram was.
What year was this?
This was probably like 2011, maybe.
Okay.
Um, and it was, at the time, Instagram was primarily for like creators and artists. And some of my staff at the time were 18-year-old, college students, and they were on Instagram, and they would tell me, "Oh, you need to make an Instagram." And the problem was, I signed up for an account, but no one that I knew was on Instagram at the time. So it was like, I wasn't an artist or a creator, and my network of friends and family wasn't on Instagram. It was kind of, it wasn't really mainstream yet. Um, so I did it, but then I quickly realized that there was a huge value to it in terms of hospitality in the restaurant. So it kind of started out where, like, I would just take organic pictures of the food and the venue and the restaurant when I would go out, and then sometimes of some of the celebrity clients. But I wouldn't even post the pictures at first. I would just kind of, like, I had a stockpile of photos that I didn't know what to do with. And then when I joined Instagram, that's when I was like, okay, well, there's something here. And it's actually, ironically enough, I had all these pictures maybe for like a year, and I didn't have anywhere to kind of put them out there. When I posted them once when I joined Instagram, my boss called me up within an hour, and he was like, I don't want you doing this, blah, blah, blah. Like, really like getting into me. And I was like, listen, like, these are people that I kind of built relationships with. A lot of the pictures are not even at the venue, blah, blah, blah. But he didn't understand the value of it at the time. I think part of it was he didn't want me to, grow within his brand. So I respected it. I kind of didn't push the envelope, but then he realized I knew what I was talking about maybe 6 months later. And then he started letting me kind of take over the social media of the restaurant and really use it as a promotional tool for their brand.
And what have you learned in that journey to, doing that back then to what you do now on social?
Um, as much as I'm a public person in what I do for work, I'm a private person in my personal life. So, trying to balance that where it's good for my career, but it's not intrusive to my personal life. But it's kind of evolved. There wasn't reels, there wasn't videos at the time. It was just pictures. You couldn't post more than one picture. You couldn't change the caption after you posted it. There was a lot of things that obviously evolved that made it better for business purposes. There was no insights. It was just literally a photo. And that was when hashtags were a thing. So sometimes I look at my old pictures, I was like, what was I thinking putting all these hashtags? But that was the way I learned it from the beginning, and as I guess technology evolved and there was more features on it, what I was doing then changed, but the principles of it did not change.
And now a quick break from restaurant influencers to welcome our newest sponsor to the show. It's Zach Oates, the founder of OVATION.
OVATION is helping restaurants to improve operations with the human touch. We are a guest experience platform for multi-unit restaurants like Friendly's, Muya, PDQ, Taziki's, and even Cali Barbecue, with thousands of others, that starts with a 2-question survey and drives revenue, location level improvement, and guest recovery. So here's how it works. The guest answers 2 questions. The first one is, how was your experience? And then from there, happy guests are invited to do things that are going to drive revenue, and unhappy guests share privately what went wrong, so you and your team can resolve that concern in real time. Our AI will even help you do that. Then the magic happens. We take all the public reviews, we take all the OVATION feedback, we categorize it using our AI, and give you detailed feedback in 34 restaurant-specific categories to improve your operations. So we make sure that guests feel good, that you look good. And if you're interested in learning more, visit ovationup.com/Sean, because any listener of Sean's is a friend of OVATION's.
How do you give white glove service to so many different personality types that might have the same demands on the same given night?
I mean, it starts with the food. Really understanding what their palate is. Some people are vegan, some people are vegetarian, some people have gluten allergies. Some people want lobster, some people don't. So, just asking the key questions of really understanding what the person wants. Most of my regulars, I know their order by heart, and I don't even ask them. I say, hey, do you want me to just, send you out an assortment of the regular stuff? And they, usually, so like send out whatever you want. I always ask them, are you really hungry? Not hungry? So, just really, the food is the backbone of it all, but then, I guess through the network again, putting people in the same room that come from different walks of life, but then there's a common ground and introducing them. So sometimes there could be an athlete and a music artist that don't know each other. I kind of put them together. So just really making people feel comfortable, giving them an outlet where, we have private dining rooms and somewhere that they could come, feel comfortable. It could be with their friends, it could be their family, their teammates, their label. It doesn't matter who they're with. they know that they have a private experience and, they're going to enjoy themselves. But the food is really the backbone of it all.
Do you use any technology tools, or is this all in your head?
Uh, I mean, my cell phone would be the most
That's the tool.
technology tool that I use. I wouldn't consider myself a technology savvy person, but I understand how to use technology to, for growth.
I mean, it's fascinating to see, obviously, the who's who list of celebrities, athletes, media personalities that have come, and not only are they coming to visit, but they're posting on their social medias about their visit. And then, you're getting media on top just saying that they came to your restaurant to visit, which is, pretty incredible. When you look at all of the press that you've gotten, this is your second year in
Yeah, so
business?
we were 2 years in January, so a little bit more than 2 years.
Congratulations, 2 years. When you look at the press coverage that you've gotten, and more importantly, the relationships that you've built, what stands out the most in the last 2 years of what you've accomplished?
And the consistency, there hasn't really been peaks and valleys. It's been pretty consistent from when we opened till this day, and that's something that we pride ourselves on. It's not hype. It's not it's hard work and it's consistency. And it doesn't matter how great one week was, we still the next week we come back to work and do the same thing over and over. And it's just really putting a product out there that people appreciate. We've become a destination. So we obviously have our built-in clientele from New York City, but I think when people come to New York, we're a destination where people have to come when they're in town just to kind of, check in, say hi, have a meal. We have a tremendous bar, so sometimes people come, they don't even sit down for dinner, but they come and hang out at the bar. I think it's just, what I'm proud of really is how consistently we've done it over the course of the last 2 years, and with pop-ups and things like that, we're continuing to expand the brand, but not forget about, the flagship.
Tell me more about the pop-ups. What's the driving force behind the pop-ups? What are the economics behind it? Why are we doing it?
Well, NBA All-Star Weekend is just, a natural fit. There's a high concentration of our clients in one place at the same time. Obviously, primarily NBA clients. And then there's obviously the music artists that are there, so, part of All-Star Weekend. It could be as a performer, as a celebrity guest, or whatever it is. And then a lot of the brands that we work with, NBA, Adidas, Nike, Body Armor, a lot of the brands that work with the NBA or the NBA players are a lot of our clients too. So there was definitely a need to, I guess, market our brand further at those kind of events. But then obviously the economics behind it too, there's opportunity to drive revenue through natural sales of food and liquor, but then also there's media partners, there's sponsorship opportunities, and I guess the most important thing is the continuous networking and the brand building that goes on.
Can you bring us inside the brand side of it? I mean, I think it's fascinating. It's why we created this show. It's, moving beyond the standard P&L of a profit and loss statement of a brick and mortar restaurant. There's so many different opportunities for restaurants to expand and be more profitable. You have big brands that are reaching out to you because of who you guys are. Can you bring us inside kind of, you don't need to name the brand, but bring us inside the brand deals something that you've done?
Yeah, so we've done some apparel brand deals. For example, they give our doormen and our management, apparel to wear, restaurant. So that's something that we've done, previously. Then obviously there's the merch component that comes off of that too, of like Say Less merch. And then for the pop-ups, the natural fit obviously is the liquor brands. They are big drivers of sponsorships for any restaurant. But we do some partnerships with them. And then, something that was new for Indy was the media companies. We did a lot of pop-up podcasts at our space
Cool.
during the daytime, and then obviously at nighttime we did the activations. So that was something that was new that went really well, and we'll continue to do that. Because obviously, a lot of athletes, a lot of music artists are doing podcasts. So when they come to New York, they go shoot their podcast, and then they come to the restaurant, or vice versa. So we're actually building out a podcast studio as part of the restaurant, which will be something that we look forward to hosting you one day.
That is fantastic. That might be the best news I've heard since I've done this show for 2 years. We believe that every restaurant can be their own media company, and that's why we turned our barbecue business into a media company. But the fact that you guys are doing it at the highest level, I mean, can you bring me inside? Give me some of the scoop. This is amazing news for me.
Well, we have some media partners, some technology partners that obviously see the value in what we do.
Yeah,
We have the ability to drive traffic to some podcasts. People always ask me, well, why don't you do a Say Less podcast? That's just not something that I'm looking to do at the current time, maybe down the road. But I do see the opportunity in terms of the entrepreneur in me and the business side of things of really curating the podcast. So I think just giving these podcast brands a platform and a space. Some of the biggest, sports and cannabis and, different kinds of podcasts, they frequent our restaurant, when they're in New York, and then they go to other venues to shoot their podcasts. And I always think like, well, why don't we just keep them here? So it's, it sounds easy to do, but you have to have the right partners to really execute it at a high level because, you need to have the technology and the space. And, there's certain things that go on behind the scenes of a podcast that you might not notice when you're watching the podcast or listening to it, but really giving again that white glove service of it's a one-stop shop.
that would be amazing. I thank you for sharing that. There's an article that you collaborated with on Medium, and it's talking about things that you wish you knew when you started a restaurant. One of the things you said, I wish someone told me to understand your audience. What do you mean?
Well, listen, when you're selling anything, you have to understand the consumer. But I think in the restaurant, that's even more important because obviously different consumers have different tastes. But in the restaurant, you could have the same dish and now two different people taste it. And one person says it's too sweet. One person says it's too salty. And they could both be right because that's their preference. And there could be nothing wrong with the dish. So like in any business, the customer is always right, but I think it's important to really, educate people too. When, people are ordering things, it starts with the waiter or the bartender, really educating the customer before they order something. This is how it's going to be. Do you like spicy dishes? Do you like sweet and sour dishes? Just to kind of reduce the waste, I guess, and really, educate the consumer on what they're ordering before they order it.
You guys are getting more into merch. Can you share a little bit more about that revenue stream? How are you thinking about it from a brand perspective?
Well, I think, there's every brand, it could be a restaurant or it could be a media company wants to sell merch. Selling merch is probably as difficult as opening a restaurant.
Giving away merch is much easier than selling.
Yeah, so, I'm not in the business to be giving away merch. It sounds great, but at the end of the day, that doesn't help the balance sheet. So I think, doing limited capsules and limited drops of nice pieces that someone would want to wear. We don't want it to look like a billboard. It's got to have, it'll be a little bit edgy, a little more premium quality. And then, it's not necessary for everyone. And that's kind of how we're going to be rolling it out. There'll obviously be the basic t-shirts, the hats, the hoodies. But then I think there's opportunities to do, cookware and different things that are restaurant oriented as part of merch down the road as well.
How do you balance supply and demand with the clients that want your services and want your time? When Kevin Hart and Mark Wahlberg want to rent out the entire restaurant at the same time, how do you pick and choose?
Luckily we have a lot of space. So we usually
how big is your space?
It's about 8,000 square feet.
Oh, that's a big space for sure.
Yeah, we put a lot of people together that we think might get along. Obviously, if it's very adamant that they have to be private, we somehow make it work. But I think that's just the beauty of what we do at Say Less is really bringing people together from different walks of life that have common interests, and it's definitely a juggling act. But I think that's what I really enjoy about the business is really the fine lines sometimes you have to walk to bringing people together, but also making them feel special and private.
If we look 2 years from now, the 4-year anniversary, where will the brand be? Are you going to be opening up in other markets? What is it going to look like?
Yeah, I think we'll continue to push the pop-ups because it's a lot easier to go to a market for a week or a weekend or even a month or 6 months and do some damage and then close up shop and leave your mark. You also it gives you the opportunity to prove the concept and do a little bit of market research. I think a lot of brands, including some of the brands that I've worked for in the past, want to just expand all over the place. And what they end up doing is they end up failing in their expansion, and then because of that, they hurt the flagship location in New York. So more is not always better, and sometimes I feel like less is more. But it is important to kind of keep the forward momentum and keep expanding the brand. And then obviously opening new locations is the ultimate goal. But I think doing that in a strategic way and a profitable way makes the most sense.
Is there anything that you've changed your mind on since you've started, that you were adamant that we wouldn't do a certain thing, but now you've reevaluated and might be doing it differently?
Uh, I don't think there's one specific thing, but there's definitely, lessons that you learn every day of, consumer behavior and even your staff and, what used to work 5 years ago might not work as well anymore. But the main thing that, is that we're in a social media driven economy. And, if you're not incorporating that into your business model, it doesn't matter what kind of business you have, you're kind of fooling yourself. So really giving people a platform to showcase your brand, but as well as showcase their brand, in it in a way that it's not cheesy,
Yeah.
Giving people a platform and a backdrop to do that, in a restaurant is very important.
How do you work with influencers, Instagram, YouTubers, TikTokers? How do you engage with them?
TikTokers definitely have been, a valuable asset to us, as we've grown. So you never really understand, like someone could have a big following, someone could have a small following. You
Yeah.
never understand the impact it might have. But it's kind of a numbers game, when you're dealing with food, you put it down as a marketing expense and you try different things, some things work, in different seasons, but they don't like it might work in the winter, but it doesn't work in the summer. A little bit of trial and error. But really, once you build relationship with people that work for you, just kind of repeat, just, don't fix something that's not broken and keep doing what's working.
What do you have any mentors?
I have several mentors, yeah.
Can you share a story about a lesson that a mentor taught you?
Just in life and, approaching business, you know, not everything is as bad as it seems, and not everything is as good as it seems. So, you're gonna have your ups and your downs, but when things are bad, they're not as bad as they seem, and when things are good, they're not as good as they seem. Kind of remain level-headed and just keep putting the work in and be consistent.
What advice do you have to anyone that's looking to launch a restaurant with partnerships?
Really understand who your partners are. Um, if you're investing in a restaurant, even more so because I've heard all the horror stories about people investing in restaurants and the stereotype of restaurants are a bad investment. At the end of the day, you're investing in the person and the concept. Someone can give you a business plan for a restaurant or any business and put a bunch of hypothetical numbers on there. But if you're not really sure about the person that you're investing in, then the business plan doesn't mean anything. You could write whatever you want, and that's just hypothetical information. It's a forecast. It could be a forecast for selling merchandise. It could be a forecast for selling cars, for selling food, whatever that is. If the person that you're investing in is not someone that you know enough about, then do a little more digging.
So every single week on Wednesday and Friday on LinkedIn, if you're listening to this show, if you're watching this show, please join us on that platform. It's a chance for you, if you're a restaurateur, if you are a content creator, if you're in marketing sales, come join our community. It's a chance for you to come on stage and share your story. Every week we give a social shout out. This week's social shout out goes to Ian Stonebrook. He used to be on the Cali Barbecue Media team. Now he is moving on up and he works for Boardroom. He works for Kevin and he does some incredible work writing some incredible pieces. So Ian, shout out to you. Dara, who would you like to give a shout out for your team? It's going to be on Entrepreneur. One person. You can't give me the entire team. I don't want the whole Say Less team. Give me one person that's gone above and beyond for the brand recently.
I'd like to shout out to my partner, Evie Shano. We came into the venture together, and we complement each other. His skill set and my skill set are really complementary of each other. I think it's important when you go into business with someone, find people that have different strengths than you, so you're not focusing on the same tasks at hand. We have a tremendous team. My partner George Caravanis, but all of us really do our part in the business. And I think that's really important to succeeding in any business, but especially hospitality is, find a team, and you're only good as your team, your staff, your chef, everyone's got to be working on the same page. And if there are issues, you address the issues and you move forward. You don't let things linger.
So we believe in smartphone storytelling. We believe every company, every person has a media machine in their pocket. Before I let you go, I just want to ask you a couple quick questions. Are you iPhone or Android?
iPhone.
And what version?
Like I said, I'm not too technology savvy, but the version before the most recent version.
Okay. Do you always update your software?
No.
Do you prefer emails or text messages?
Text messages.
How many emails do you get a day?
200 to 400.
200 to 400. How many emails do you enjoy reading?
I enjoy reading all of them.
All of them?
Yeah, listen, I mean, if it's spam, you just delete it. If it's requires attention, you pay more attention to it. But I think every piece of data that you come across is teaching you something. And when you really combine all the data together, you're getting, you're learning about your business.
What's your favorite app on your phone?
Favorite app? The ones I use the most are probably ESPN and Instagram.
And Instagram. What's your least favorite app?
I don't have a least favorite. If I don't like it, it's not on my phone.
Do you have notifications on your phone, or do you turn notifications off?
For certain apps, I turn them on. For certain ones, they're off.
Where do you listen to music?
So this is probably the craziest thing, and my friends make fun of me. I don't listen to music.
You don't listen to music?
Oh.
No music at all?
No music. I mean, listen, when I'm out or in the club or in the car, I listen to music, but I'm not a person that downloads music and listens to music. And
so when you're in the car, do you listen to FM?
Yeah.
FM. What's your
FM
what
or
channel?
satellite radio.
Or satellite radio. Okay.
Yeah. But I mean, I know every music artist out there, and they're my clients, and I never talk about music with them because I just don't know anything about their music. Once I become friends with them, I become familiar with their music, but I'm never like a fan of their music before I meet them, which I think helps in, developing the friendship and the relationship. It's not based around their music.
That's awesome. Well, if you guys want to keep in touch with me, I'm weirdly available. It's at Sean P. Walchef, ShawnPWalchef. Dara, what's the best way for people to keep in touch with you and the brand?
So probably Sei Less NYC, and then Dara June NYC.
All right. We'll put links in the show notes. Dara, we really appreciate it. If you ever make it to the West Coast, if you ever make it to San Diego, please let me know. We'd love to have you over for some barbecue and just talk shop. Really appreciate your time, man. Thank you.
Love it. Thank you for having me. And likewise, when you're in New York, please hit me up and come by.
I will. Absolutely. Appreciate you, Dara. Thank you. And,
Thank you.
As always, guys, stay curious, get involved. Don't be afraid to ask for help, and we'll catch you guys next week. Thank you for listening to Restaurant Influencers. If you want to get in touch with me, I am weirdly available at Sean P. Walchef, ShawnPWalchef. Cali Barbecue Media has other shows. You can check out Digital Hospitality. We've been doing that show since 2017. We also just launched a show, season 2, Family Style, on YouTube with Toast. And if you are a restaurant brand or a hospitality brand and you're looking to launch your own show, Cali Barbecue Media can help you. Recently, we just launched Room for Seconds with Greg Majewski. It is an incredible insight into leadership, into hospitality, into enterprise restaurants and franchisee relationships. Take a look at Room for Seconds. And if you're ready to start a show, reach out to us, betheshow.media. We can't wait to work with you.